All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Mondays Down South. You have Evan, myself, and Sai. And Sai, you can introduce a new guest here. I know that I've been playing basketball with this fella. I called him by the wrong name of Muskan, which that is not correct. But we're obviously happy to have Manas on the show. Sai, I'll let you introduce on one of your friends or cousins. I'm not sure how you guys know each other, but I'll let you take it away.
So I would say he's more similar to a cousin, even though we are friends. One of my best friends since we've grown up together, since we were, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old, we met. Long time friend, but also a very, very intelligent basketball analyst, if you will. I know I'm just going to throw that out there, put the pressure on him for today's topic. Manas, you can tell people where you graduated from, because then people will understand why you like basketball as much as you do. And we just appreciate you coming on and chatting basketball with us, man. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. I will be known as Moose Khan for the duration of this podcast, so please refer to me by my stage name. If you guys are curious, me and Zach are cousins in the way that West Virginia family members are also cousins. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I'm a longtime fan, first-time guest, repping the Lakers here, if you guys can see that. I am a proud graduate of North Carolina, so I'm a big Tar Heels basketball fan. Obviously watching The Last Dance right now, but excited to join you guys.
We're excited to have you, man. All right, so today, just for context, we're going to be talking about our top 5 NBA teams in our lifetime. I think we all took different approaches to the list. That's why I wanted Manas on this episode, because him and I are huge basketball fans, and I can't even tell you the number of hours him and I have spent screaming back and forth at each other over basketball conversations and which players and teams we think are better. And we just thought it was the perfect time to bring you on. Before we get to that, though, we want to do a little recap of the last week and a half in sports since last time we recorded. And the main topic of conversation is, what was our draft takeaways? Like, I think the biggest question I'd have for you guys is, give me a team or two that you think had the best draft, and give me something you were disappointed in or something weird that kind of came up. And Zach and Evan, go ahead. Manas, we won't put you on the spot. We'll keep you for basketball if you know this isn't something you want to necessarily address. So you two go ahead.
I would say my jump in here, my biggest takeaways, or at least teams that I think did the most. The first one was a team that didn't make many picks, but overall, using what they had, I think the 49ers, like the way they were able to reload and solidify themselves at the top of the totem pole, I think was incredible. And that combines obviously the draft picks they made. I mean, getting Kinlaw at that, I think, was decent value there. And then I think on our live show, we were complaining about them not getting a receiver. So then they jump back in and they get Brandon Ayuk, who's I think going to be a great guy to pair with Debo and Kittle in there. And then you use some of those picks to get Trent Williams, given that Joe Staley ended up retiring. I mean, I think that's just like that overall haul is just fantastic, and I think solidifies them at the top. And the other team, I think that made a big jump. Sai, I'm sure you'll touch on it, not to suck up too much here, but I think the Colts did a great job really ramping up at the skill positions. I mean, getting Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, great selection, and then kind of planning for the future as well at the quarterback position with Jacob Eason, maybe being that quarterback of the future. So those, I think, were the two teams that really stood out to me in terms of making big leaps.
Yep. Yeah, and just jumping on top of that, Evan, I thought the 49ers did a great job. Obviously on the podcast beforehand, I was really hoping they were going to pull in a Judy or a CeeDee Lamb, but Kyle Shanahan's a man of his own, and for them to be able to get the defense to stack up on the defensive side and get Kinlaw right and just solidify that front four that they had last year. But then also go for a guy in Brandon Ayuk. When I was listening in on the explanation that Kyle Shanahan gave afterwards to the media, and he said that Brandon Ayuk was his number one guy.
Yeah,
so they wanted him in terms of like the best value, right? So like where they when they saw the entire draft board and they saw like potential steals of like where these players are projected to fall, he stated that Brandon Ayuk was the best pick for his projected position. And I did a little bit of homework on him. I had known about him beforehand because my roommate in Austin, Texas was from Arizona State University. So he was, I watched a couple of Arizona State games with him and was able to, watch N'Keal Harry and Brandon Ayuk just straight ball over like the last 3-4 years. And so Brandon Ayuk, I definitely known about from a speed standpoint, and he definitely seems like that missing puzzle piece in the San Francisco offense to really take them all the way. So I thought the 49ers did a great job. And I also thought that the Cowboys did a really good job. I mean, just getting CeeDee Lamb at 18 actually. And I mean, that's incredible. And if you look at that offense now, Dallas is notoriously known for having a great, fearsome offensive line. But when you look at their playmakers and their offensive talent around them and like the skill position players, they have Dak Prescott coming back. They got Zeke, and they have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb on two different sides of the ball.
And Andy Dalton on $1 year, $7 million deal.
And Andy Dalton, that's right. That's right. Can't forget about him. He's definitely coming for Dak's job. But no, in all seriousness, I thought those teams, more than any other team, did a fabulous job drafting.
Yep. So I do not want to toot my own horn, but Evan already touched on the Colts, and I was extremely happy with that draft. I was actually playing 21 and shooting hoops with Monhass and Evan when we were talking about the Colts draft analysis. And before we ever even made a pick, I was like, they were asking me who I wanted in the second round. I was like, I want a big-bodied receiver, and I think Michael Pittman would be perfect. I had no idea who we were going to draft. 30 minutes later, we're like struggling to breathe after playing, going all in on 21. And I go check my phone, and of course, Michael Pittman had been drafted. So I was super excited and got back Jonathan Taylor and then Justin Blackmon at safety. And I just think we filled a lot of positions of need. So I was really happy about that. I'm going to touch on a team that I think did badly in the draft. Zach, your Falcons, that first round pick was one of the worst first round picks I've seen in a while. The draft board probably had like 30 guys that were graded higher than him by like every network ever. And somehow the Falcons went for AJ Terrell. I'm not just trying to roast you for the sake of roasting you, but your reaction to that pick was hilarious. And even after the fact, I couldn't really get behind it. So I think the Falcons may not have had the best first round pick. And then I think the Texans, again, I don't understand why Bill O'Brien is their GM, because every single time he seems to make a transaction or move or a draft, I just can't help but question what he's doing. I just don't really think they did anything of significance again after making all the trades that they did and acquiring who they did. I just don't see the Texans. They basically drafted a guy fresh out of high school with one of their top picks this year. And I don't really understand the rationale behind the transactions that they're doing. Who knows? Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I'm very happy that they're in the AFC South right now and that we get to play alongside them. So that's about it. I think we should jump into the NBA though, because I think these lists are going to be pretty entertaining, and I think we'll have a lot to talk about. So I say we jump into that. I say, since he's our guest and we've been following this model, we'll have Monhass go first. The way we've done it, Monhass, is we start with 5. We each do number 5, and then we move to 4, and then 3, and then just kind of in that order. So if you want to start with number 5 for you, kick us off.
I guess, should we kind of talk about how we made our list though? Because I think there might be some differences in terms of the setup. So like in terms of time period we looked at, like, did we do it, a specific year with a team, or was it more like, the dynasty type for the few years? I guess, how did you guys do it?
Yeah, my thought was as we addressed our teams, it would make a little bit more sense, and then we could talk about it. But I think maybe doing it up front might be the right move. Manas, you could start by telling us like how you came up with this 5, and then start with number 5, and then we can go one at a time that way.
That'll work.
Yeah, that sounds good. So my list, I came up with post 2000. I think around 2000, the convent of the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and then I became basketball conscious around that period of time with the relevance of the Lakers coming up, and that became my team. So that's when I started really following basketball, and I can't really talk about any other team before then. I honestly couldn't tell you who won the championship in '99 after the Bulls, so like, who knows? So yeah, I started post 2000s. Should I go ahead with number 5?
Go for it.
Please do.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So number 5, I have a tie for 5th place between the 2015 Warriors and the 2013 Heat. So the 2015 Warriors, this is the OG Warriors team they just sort of came out of nowhere for that year. Bunch of different the death lineup. I think that's where it started. Harrison Barnes and Andre Iguodala, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. They just have that versatility lineup. That was just, I think that was innovative for its time. That's what every other team has sort of copied. You can see with the Rockets and even the Cavs, they sort of tried to model after building teams around shooters. So that team definitely stood out. And then the other team, the 2013 Heat, I mean, I don't think they need any introduction. They have 2 first ballot Hall of Famers and Dwayne and LeBron, and then you have Chris Bosh and all their cast of characters following them. So those are my top, or the bottom of the best teams, I would say.
Can I just point to something? He brought up the Warriors, the 2016 Warriors, and the starting 5. I love the clear UNC bias with you introducing the worst person of that starting 5 in Harrison Barnes first, as opposed to starting with Steph Curry.
Nicely done.
I just felt like I had to be in character. I didn't want to misrepresent myself. There was no other besides
Fair
Harrison.
enough.
There's actually another UNC player named James Michael McAdoo who gets swept under the rug.
Classic.
Stop.
11th man on the bench.
But now that you brought it out,
He was the water boy. He was bringing water to Steph Curry and Klay.
if he was lucky, he was bringing less than water, we'll say.
I mean, I guess Steph didn't play college ball too far away from UNC, so there's some relevance there with Davidson. Yep. Okay, fair enough. Zach, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. So in terms of my top 5, I took it more as since I was born, the top 5 teams since '93, essentially '93 to present. So in my lifetime, I kind of drew up the top 5 NBA teams, but I do have an honorable mention. So I'll list my honorable mention and I'll list my 5.
Save the honorable mention to after number 1. That's why I didn't even ask Manhas's, because I think generally after number 1 we'll throw the honorable mention out, just because that's generally something a little bit closer to heart, I think.
Size pumped about the honorable mention.
Yeah, I was like, we gotta save the honorable mention, man.
I love my honorable mention. I love my honorable mention almost more than I actually love my top 5, because the top 5 there's specific teams that you're going to point out. So my 5 is the 07-08 Boston Celtics, and the reason why I love that team was this was probably in the 2000s. This is probably the most feared team coming out of the Eastern Conference that I can remember. This is a team with Paul Pierce in his prime. This is a team with KG in his prime. This is a team with Ray Allen, who was just shooting lights out and widely known as the best three-point shooter at this period of time. And then, also they called themselves the Big Three, right? But they also had a Big Four, in my opinion, with Rajon Rondo, who had come out of nowhere and made his presence as a very important point guard on that. Just in the NBA at that period of time. So I think between those 4 players and the fact that they beat the Lakers in the championship that year, I think it was like a 4-1. It was almost a sweep against the Lakers in 07-08. And so I just wanted to bring light to them. I just remember how feared of an organization they were, and they didn't really face a lot of competition until Rose went to Chicago and LeBron went to Miami, because they were always able to defeat Cleveland pretty handedly in the Eastern Conference Finals, because LeBron had no competition around or no supporting cast around him. So in terms of my 5, I would go Boston Celtics 07-08.
Nice. So that was the one I was torn with at 5, and I think I made my list a little differently, where I kind of bucketed teams into not just specific seasons, but over like core groups of players almost, and core teams. So my 5 is the Cleveland Cavaliers core of LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and of course Kevin Love. So I debated them and the Celtics there, and the championship pedigree almost with the Celtics was a little more in that core, but I just think over that span of time they kind of ran into the buzzsaw that obviously was the Warriors. So I don't think they maybe get as much credit as they deserve, simply because every time they got to the finals, all right, now we have to play the Warriors, who I think, as we'll find out, are on probably the tops of all our lists, or at least near the top. So I think that was just, a great core that just dominated the Eastern Conference, would, cut through the Eastern Conference like knife and butter with ease, and then run into the Warriors. So I think they deserve a little more credit. And how can we forget that Kyrie Irving shot, and just all those clutch moments? There you go. So I'm just Suck off the side
Did I
today.
not pull that shot off in size I Monash when we were playing 21 the other day?
It was a step-by-step replica of the Kyrie shot.
All right.
In size I, Evan.
I know we're getting off topic here, but if we're going to get off topic, we're going to get off topic. We're bringing up basketball this week. I think I had a good week of basketball, all included. I mean, we played some 2-on-2 earlier this week, and I'm not usually on my game that way. So if you're going to be calling me out for basketball, at least I had a good week. So, yeah.
So I will say you're more agile. You used to be strictly a post player, and you still have maintained those post moves, but now you have a little aspect of quickness, and you got a crossover. So instead of us finding you in the paint, then you going to work in the paint, you kind of post yourself up towards the free throw line, and you make a move right then and there. So you're a little bit more agile than the last time I remember you playing. I'll give you that.
It makes so much sense for Zebo to break down my basketball game while we're talking about the top 5 NBA teams of our lifetime. It's very, very relevant.
If we're breaking it down, I would like to say I think there's a lot of Last Dance influence in Sai's game right now. He's bringing back the mid-range. He'll pull up right on top of the key, right in your grill, right at the free throw line.
Yes, sir.
Ice in his veins. He's done that multiple times this week, right at the buzzer to get that win.
Oh man, we've really gotten away from it. I love this. So thank you guys for making it seem like I'm good at basketball. I'm very, very thankful to y'all. And Evan just keeps giving shout outs to my favorite players and teams, and it's great. One thing I will say is, speaking on the Kyrie Irving topic, the only thing I want to give credit for is his reverse move, because that's the one thing that's been ingrained in my basketball mentality all week. But moving on from that, I completely understand Evan including the Cavaliers, and of course I'm super happy he included Kyrie, but my analogy, or I guess the way I approached creating my list, was more similar to Zach's, in that I took the approach of since the day that we were born. So for me, that was 93 on to now, which is 2020. What were the best teams? And I didn't take a single year perspective, or else my list probably would have been a lot different. I took what did these teams do with their core group over a course of time, or their main player? What did they do over the course of their run? What were they able to accomplish? And that's how I put my list together. And with that being said, I think mine's going to be a little bit different, in that number 5 for me is actually also the Heat with Manhas, but it's not that specific. Sorry, Muskan. It's not that specific year, the 2012. It's the span in which LeBron was there. And the championships that they won together, and just the creation of the big 3. Although I'm a little bit annoyed with the concept to this day of people saying, oh, LeBron created the big 3 by going to Miami. I think big 3s existed before then. I think the big thing people were saying is, oh, LeBron went over there. And I'm like, sure, LeBron decided to join forces with Wade and Bosh, but other big 3s were assembled throughout the course of the NBA. I think he gets way too much crap for it. And ultimately he went there. And even at that time period, I was very upset because I didn't want him to play with the Heat, and I didn't like him. But to this day, I take it back. I think he went there. He showed his dominance and his athleticism on that team, and created one of the best teams of our lifetime. But I think there's a reason they're at 5, and I'll get into that more as the list goes on. So that's my number 5. I'll kick it over to Manhas for number 4. If you guys have any comments on that, by all means, go ahead.
Yeah, that sounds good. I hear what you're saying about the big 3. I think those have existed throughout the history of the NBA. You look at the Lakers from the 80s and the Celtics of the 80s, they got big 3. So yeah, I totally hear you there. Number 4 for me is the 2009 Los Angeles Lakers. It's a team that has Kobe, Pau, Lamar, and Andrew Bynum. This is the first of the back-to-back Lakers championships teams. This is after they lost to Zach's big 3 Boston Celtics. They came back in a big way that year. I think Kobe finally realized that he didn't have to do everything, and he took a step back and then just let Pau be Pau. Pau was honestly like one of the most skilled dudes of our generation. I don't think he gets enough credit, but he was 19 points a game or something to that effect, but he was just so efficient, even on defense. Like he was probably the unsung hero. And then you have Lamar Odom, who was Mr. Versatility. He did all the little things. They were just a force that year. I don't think anything could have stopped them that year after they lost that first title against the Celtics. But yeah, number 4 for me is the 2009 Lakers.
I like the Andrew Bynum shout out on the pod. I just can't help but laugh at Andrew Bynum.
He was a young guy back then. He was 21 or something, and then he just sort of burst onto the scene. I don't know what happened after those Lakers years, but he put out a good 5 years.
That's why I laugh. Yeah, I think I have the story of the Sixers. I think signed him to a big deal after he had that success. And one of my closest friends is a Sixers fan and like bought the jersey and was all in. He was like pretty young at the time, so he is just ever since then like just hates Andrew Bynum for not doing anything once they signed it up that big money contract. So
I was getting ready for the Tyler Hansbrough shout out, Manas, and because I remember him being on like a yellow team, and I was like, oh wait, that was the Pacers, not the Lakers. Okay, sweet. No UNC shout out this time around.
I don't even know if there was a UNC player. It's kind of disappointing, but I need to get that pattern back into the system. I'll re-edit my other 3 teams to get that.
To get the UNC bias.
Yeah.
No, I actually really like the Pau Gasol shout out though, because growing up, I always was like, who is this guy? Like, who's this? Like this tall, like European looking dude, just like on this team with Kobe. It didn't like when you first see it on paper, it doesn't make a lot of sense for those two to be together. But in reality, that team gelled so well together, and Pau truly was like he was so good down low. Like, and he spaced the floor. He kind of created the almost what you could see with like the 4 these days, where you see these guys being able to pull up from 20 feet and then also post up and have that post move kind of presence. So he was the perfect fit for that team, and they were deep. And those were definitely the years where Kobe kind of showed, like Manas was saying, his ability to lead a team and win even without people like Shaq around. So I think that was a really good like specific notion or mention to make for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of Shaq and Kobe, my 4 is the 01-02 Los Angeles Lakers. So one thing I was really impressed with that specific team was you're dealing with the 2 best players in the NBA on the same team. I mean, they were by far the 2 leading superstars. Their jersey sales were out the wazoo. Like, everyone loved the shooting guard potential of like the way like Kobe played the game. He was like a point guard, shooting guard, and a small forward all wrapped in one position, which was something new to the NBA. I mean, you had seen it a couple of times before, like Larry Bird and Scottie Pippen, et cetera. But Kobe did way more, like way, way more. And then you also have a guy like Shaq who was versatile for his stature, for that height and weight. I mean, it was otherworldly. And so them 2 together, playing together, is obviously, there's like a little bit of a rift, especially towards the tail end before Shaq left a couple of years later. But like the fact that they were able to mesh their own styles and come together as a team and win, I mean, they swept the New Jersey Nets. They swept them. Like, that's a Jason Kidd. That was a good team back then. And so the fact that they swept in the finals, the fact that they had other guys like Robert Horry knocking down threes, knocking down that tray ball from the outside.
The GOAT.
He is the absolute GOAT. And I just thought between those 3 players, between like the Derek Fisher running point, I just love that team and figured they are worthy of a shout out. So that's my number 4.
Yeah, and let's never forget that Robert Horry has more championships than basically every player.
Oh yeah, because he went to the Spurs and he won like 4 of the Spurs.
I think he was wasn't he on the Rockets, or was that someone else?
I don't know if he was on the. Was he on the Rockets? Are you thinking of a recent?
I might be thinking of someone else, but he was on the Spurs too for a bunch of those runs, and he hit daggers to end team lives.
I believe he's supposed to be a very handsome man too. I don't remember. I don't know if I'm mixing him up with somebody, but
I think you're
supposed
all
to be
right. All right.
Oh no, I'm talking about Fox. You're right. It's Fox. Yep.
Who I will say,
yeah, Rick Fox.
UNC alum.
You're thinking of Rick Fox.
Yeah, no, that is a foxy man. Let's just be frank here. That's a good looking dude. Yeah.
I see what you did there.
Kind of something after that. All righty. E, who you got?
So I've got the San Antonio Spurs at 4 with the Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, and then right towards the end of that core, as some of those guys were getting older, you get Kawhi Leonard in there. So I think they only got 1 title out of that group, if I'm not mistaken. But I just think the longevity of that, specifically those first 3, it was just a great trio that seemed to play really well together, and Pop was able to mesh everyone together well. That just seemed to feed off each other. And I think if you put maybe Tim Duncan notwithstanding, but those guys into other systems or other teams, I don't think they get to the same level of their potential, I guess, as they ended up doing. But I think they just played so well together and meshed so well together, and they were really able to make a good run at it, and ultimately grab one championship, I think. But and then when you get Kawhi in there, obviously at the beginning of his career, then it's a game changer. But yeah, that's what I got it for.
Okay, fair enough. And it's funny because I really want to address y'all's lists, but there is a strong chance that a lot of people you mentioned are going to be on my list later, so it doesn't really make sense for me to talk about it now. So that's why I'm holding off, even though it's really hard for me not to want to make certain points. Number 4 for me, and this might be a little controversial, but number 4 for me is actually the Warriors, and not a specific year. I'm talking about the Warriors starting from when their dynasty started to when they acquired Kevin Durant, to Kevin Durant leaving and Klay Thompson getting hurt and the whole D'Angelo Russell and Draymond and falling out kind of situation. So that period of time, the Warriors actually are number 4 for me. And I know to a lot of people that might be a little bit controversial because a lot of people might have had them higher. And I think if I had a single season team of the Warriors, I would have taken one of those Kevin Durant years, and put that as maybe my best team of all time. But when I look at it holistically and what a team did in their course of that era of the big 3, big 4 that they had, I think the Warriors are 4, specifically because before Kevin Durant got there, their title runs were impressive, no doubt for sure. But I've touched on it earlier with the Cavaliers, one of those seasons, and then them having to go acquire Durant to take it to that next level. And they won with Durant, but at the end of the day, it wasn't more than like a 4 or 5 year period. Whereas a lot of the other teams that I have later on are over a course of much longer and they have more titles. And that's why I think I had the Warriors at 4 for me. But again, I will say if I took a single year and I just did teams based on a single year, the years with KD would probably be, probably at the top of that list. So that's where I kind of had a little bit of a breakdown. And I think 3, 2, and 1 on my list will give you a better idea of how I approached my 5. So yeah, that's my number 4.
And I guess the argument to that, and I like you said, I don't want to jump into too much because I think we all have them coming up, but it's like that story is also not over. So you say like theirs was only a 5-year run, over, but if you look at what they've been able to build up right now, they're in a spot to start doing it again. And I mean, you still have that core of 3, assuming they bring Andre Iguodala. That's all I'm going to say. But we'll.
I'll say this. I made the list with what I think, and I strongly believe that the Warriors are done for. Like, I don't think Steph Curry or Klay Thompson will win another title with the Warriors for the rest of their existence. I think they should be very thankful that this season of all seasons was the season that the NBA shut down, because up until last year, the Warriors were one of the most dominant teams. And of course, the 1 year that they're teed up to basically not make the playoffs and do nothing is the season the NBA gets shut down, and basically LeBron or Kawhi or somebody like that gets denied another title, and the Warriors just get to sit there and be like, oh, we had all our guys hurt anyway. So I think they actually really benefited, because I think Steph would have been exposed this year for not being able to carry a team without Klay and all these other pieces around him with Durant and all these other guys. But I'm not going to get super into the Steph conversation because I've had it with you guys plenty of times. We'll save it for another time. But I just think that dynasty is over now. That's just how I feel about it. And that's why I think that they are number 4 for me, because I think that 5-year span was it. Whereas some of these other teams had a much longer run of championships, and it was more sustained, I would say. I'll put it that way. Because the other thing is Steph, I think, won his first one at 27 or 28. So, I mean, it was a little bit different with some of these other guys and some of the teams that they walked into. So, yeah.
But they crammed just as many titles into that period, which I think is why it's so incredible. Like that number of titles, with maybe not the Lakers.
Great NBA Finals.
I mean, that's insane.
You don't know who my 3 ones are.
I guess you do have the earlier. I'm thinking of only 2000s, which is how I did my list. But you have older times. So.
You don't know who my 3, 2, and 1 are. So hold on.
Carry on.
Fair enough. All right, go.
All right, Manas, what's your 3, man?
Cool. So number 3, going off of what Evan already said, the mid 2010s Spurs team, the 2014 Spurs in specific, with I believe they had Kawhi, who's a little baby at that point, coming out of San Diego State, and then capturing the tail ends of the Parker, Ginobili, Duncan eras, and also my favorite Spur of all time, Danny Green. They were sort of born of the ashes of the Miami Heat. They couldn't get over the hump. The previous year, they had to overcome the Ray Allen shot. But they came back really strong. They're probably one of the best teams of all time. There's no real superstar on that team, I would say. It was just Pop mind melding all these different personalities, not even personalities, but like players that were willing to play together, and they were just so smart and efficient. I would put their defensive prowess against like any other team we've seen. They were just like Duncan, who's probably one of the smartest basketball players we've seen. And then you have Kawhi, who's just a freak defensively. I would be pretty confident that they could shut down the Warriors if they were facing them even to this day. They just had so much experience and depth at each position that they were just really stacked. Number 3 is 2014 Spurs.
I think about that matchup you just put in my head with the Warriors of like the recent couple years and then the Spurs of 2014, and that would have been an interesting matchup between Tony Parker and Steph, and then Manu and Clay. That would have been interesting. That would have been like a good little back and forth there because both of them were locked down defensively. But my 3 is the 2012-2013 Miami Heat. I know we had mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to give them a shout out. Just, the Ray Allen shot, like you had just mentioned, Manas. That was incredible for them to storm back, win the series, beat the San Antonio Spurs 4-3. It was just complete and utter dominance that entire year. Chris Bosh was one of the best in his position, and LeBron and D Wade were doing his thing up front. And I mean, that was as good of a big 3 as it gets. But I was glad to see LeBron win a couple of championships there. I believe that was his final championship in Miami because I think they won it the first year he got there and the second year, right?
I think
he
won mistaken in that middle 2 years.
I think he won the second and third year.
Gotcha. Okay. So regardless, so that was probably, I'm not sure if that was his first or second championship with the Heat. It was his first championship with the Heat. I forget, but regardless, it was nice seeing LeBron get a championship there. Whether it was his first or his second, he was able to kind of build that repertoire of being, of maybe becoming the best NBA player of all time. Because the one thing that he was lacking at that period of time in the early, 2010s was lack of championships, right? If Jordan has 6, he needs to start accumulating his. And so I think those couple years, in the seasons with the Heat, definitely did that. And so I wanted to give LeBron and the Miami Heat a shout out at number 3.
Cool. I no arguments here, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
So
I was going to say Maroney's
on 3.
Right?
Aren't you on 3 or did you do 3?
I just did 3.
What's that?
I think it's you, Evan. You've been going after Zach.
Oh, have I? Okay. Oh, okay. I got Heat as well. Yeah. I went back and forth between them and the Spurs because I don't really look too fondly, honestly, back on that Heat team just because of how it came together. And I think it wasn't even how it came together, but all the hoopla they created around it. The pep rally they had.
The pep rally, that was the best.
Like the Miami element of it all, and then LeBron ended up jumping ship, which was the right move. But so I don't really look back too fondly on that team for those reasons. But I don't think you can make a list like this without mentioning. I mean, obviously, like you guys touched on, it's just it was such a great core of 3, but so many surrounding pieces to that, and just a overall good run. So. I couldn't make a list without mentioning, despite my, distaste for that squad.
So it's interesting because now that we've all talked about the Heat, I think we can talk about this a little bit more. Manas and I had this conversation like a couple of weeks back when we were shooting hoops, but the kind of like a manifestation of Dwayne Wade being that MVP caliber player the year that they went and won the ship before LeBron got there, back when he had like Shaq and he had like Chalmers. I think he had Chalmers and people like that at that point, right? And he went to the finals and basically went nuts in the playoffs to get them to the finals and then had that monster run. And then LeBron came over and Wade kind of had to be that first guy that like was clearly the de facto number 1 on a team that was taking a back step and basically letting, having his buddy come over and take over, which was a really interesting dynamic at the time because in my lifetime, I hadn't seen a lot of people kind of be able to navigate that line very well. You know, look at Kobe and Shaq, for example. It was really interesting to see that. But then Manhas and I had this conversation about how good was Dwayne Wade truly in terms of how long he sustained being a top player in the NBA. What do you guys think about that? Because when you look at it season to season, Dwayne Wade had some like almost like just like super flashy, but at the same time, like he won championships. So it's like, it's hard to kind of, like we're talking about it. I was saying Dwayne Wade definitely in his prime was, you know, one of the best shooting guards I've ever seen. But I think Manhas, I'll let you speak on this, but I think you were trying to say something along the lines of like, I think he gets more credit than he deserves sometimes. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I mean, I think at his peak, he was comparable to Kobe. Like what he was doing on the court, his speed and just raw athleticism, it was just incredible. And the energy that he played with. I think one of the most underlooked aspects of Wade's game was how good of a defensive player he was. I think he averaged like a block a game and like multiple steals a game for a long stretch of time, for like that period of like when he came into the league to like maybe about 2010. Like he was going full tilt. And then obviously, like you're saying, Sai, like as soon as LeBron came onto the team, there was a sort of changing of the guard. And like Dwayne was no longer the alpha, and he played his role well. Like he just couldn't be that same guy. And I don't know if you guys feel this way, but he also looked like he dropped off much quicker than I would have expected. And this might have been due to age. Like he came out of college like after 3 years maybe, whereas LeBron came straight out. So there was like a few years gap there. But I think his peak, we didn't enjoy his peak as long as we potentially enjoyed other superstars' peak, just because you know, he was a little bit older, and then he also had to play with such a great team of that heat of that generation.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of like a Jordan-esque type of player. Like when you look at his style over the years. So Dwayne Wade won the NBA Finals back in 2004, I believe, and he did it all himself, much to what you both had alluded to. But he was more of a speedster. He was supremely athletic, way more athletic than anybody else on the court, and he was able to get the job done because of those two factors, right? And then over a period of time, he never really lost that, but he channeled it in different ways. Like he became more of like a well-rounded player. He developed more of a shot, right? I mean, he you know, maybe channeled more effort towards defense as opposed to offense, especially when LeBron came in town. And you know, he obviously wanted you know, LeBron started to take over the team, you know, game by game. But that's just kind of the way I look at Dwayne Wade. I don't look at it as necessarily a regression. I just look at it as like as he got older, he had the maturity of like understanding that he needed to develop new skills to his game that didn't necessarily they weren't as like fan friendly, or they weren't as like pleasing to the eye, right? Athletically pleasing, but he just developed more of like he developed his game into the role player that he needed to in order for his team to be successful. And I think that's a large part of why the Miami Heat became so successful in those later years. So that's just kind of my thought.
Fair enough. I guess I'm jumping in on 3 now, right?
I think so.
So
I've gotten lost.
Number 3, yeah, no, it's me because you were the last one to talk about the Heat. So number 3 for me is the San Antonio Spurs. I again looked at my teams based off their level of success with their core intact. So the Spurs, starting from 1999 all the way till I believe 2013 or 14, were winning championships together with the same core. Like, how ridiculous is that? At 15 years, they sustained that level of success, which is why I couldn't help but want to put them, you know, on my top 3. You started with Tim Duncan and David Robinson back in '99 with the additions of Parker, Ginobili in the early years. And then you have people like Bruce Bowen, like these just dominant defensive players thrown into the mix, like Manhas was saying. And then later on, you had Kawhi Leonard. And what has always stayed true is that team with that coaching and the players that they had were always able to adapt to that team mentality. And no matter who they added or who they lost, they always sustained the ability to be successful. And nobody was able to really be a drama queen or a diva up until Duncan and those guys left. And we had that whole Kawhi, like let me fake an injury and be petty and sit out and then go somewhere else and play situation. Up until then, I think it was one of the most drama dominant franchises we'd ever seen. And that accumulated to 5 titles since Tim Duncan joined that team with Popovich there. And that's just something that I don't think you could ever take away from them. And that's why I think they deserve even more credit, because I'm looking at them in terms of like how long they were able to sustain that level of high caliber play. I mean, with Duncan, basically, I don't know, what was it, his early 40s, something like that, he was still winning championships. So that's crazy to me. I don't even understand how they were able to keep it up. But that's what I think was the beauty of the Spurs is that team mentality. So they're number 3 for me. Yeah. Manas, I think it's up to you for 2.
Gotcha. Yeah, so number 2, I believe Zach might have had them number 5, but I have the 2001 Lakers as my number 2 team. I think this might have been, of the three-peat Lakers, this might have been one of the weaker Laker teams in the regular season, but I think that has to do with both Shaq and Kobe, mostly Shaq, just taking it a little easy in the regular season after their dominance the previous year. I'm sure he was laying a little hard into the Papa Johns during those days. But when the playoffs came around, they went 15-1 in the playoffs. They lost 1 game, which is insane. Wow. Like, they were incredibly dominant. This was peak Kobe in terms of being totally okay with his Robin role. And then you have all the role players, as we've already talked about earlier, Robert Horry, Rick Fox, a bunch of other players. And of course you have Tyronn Lue, who got stepped over by Allen Iverson. Might have been one of the greatest moments in playoff history. But yeah, they had so much dominance in the playoffs, and especially led by Shaq. Once he got the ball in the paint, like, it was 70% chance either on, he'd probably dunk it, or he was going to make like a 40% chance free throw. But either way, like, it was just game over for the other team. And then that dominance, I'm not sure we've seen out of a player in terms of like a singular pass and then guaranteed shot until maybe even Giannis or like LeBron on like a breakaway dunk. But yeah, 2001 Lakers, primetime Kobe and Shaq.
Yep.
I love that one, man. And vibing off of your Laker mentality, my number 2 is the 2019-2020 Los Angeles Lakers. No, I'm just kidding. It's we're gonna take the timeline back a little bit to the 90s. We're gonna go 95-96 Chicago Bulls. So this was the season. I found this season more interesting than all the other ones in terms of the Chicago Bulls' success in the late 80s and early 90s. And the reason why I found this one so interesting was because they went 72-10 in the regular season. And so that wasn't beat until, recently the 2015-2016 Warriors, who were able to have, keep their losses in the single digits, and they went 73-9. But a couple things about the Bulls that I found pretty cool that season was Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan they both went to the All-Star game from the same team. They were both supremely dominant. This was the first year that Dennis Rodman was in town. And so just from a defensive standpoint, Dennis Rodman was their lockdown guy. And I mean, just the amount of turnovers that team caused and inevitably led to transition points with Scottie Pippen and MJ on the other side of the court was just fantastic. I did a little bit more research on them. They went undefeated in the entire month of January. And that's not like, oh, you have, like if that were like Christmas, I'd be like, oh, that's impressive. Oh, wait a second. We're like off for half the year because of Christmas and just like the holiday season in general. But this was the entire season, or this is the entire month of January. They went undefeated. And so,
hey, Zach, I don't want to cut you off, but real quick, was your research usually around 9 p.m. on a Sunday night or 10 p.m. on a Sunday night?
This research was roughly 10 minutes before we went live here.
No. The reason I'm asking if it was 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. on a Sunday night is because that's when The Last Dance airs. Like, your list, I was gonna say that fits perfectly into the most recent episode. So I just love the tie into the fact that that's super relevant. But please keep going. I just thought that was
Yeah,
hilarious.
in all honesty, the last episode that I saw was were the episodes last week that highlighted just Rodman specifically.
Mhm.
So I didn't necessarily pay too much attention to a lot of the other detail. I'm assuming these are the most recent episodes that you're alluding to, but nevertheless, they were my two just because I thought 72-10 record was standout. I mean, it had never been done before. And then the fact that they won the NBA Finals that year too, I thought was much to their credit. So Chicago Bulls 95-96 was my number two. Yeah.
All right, I'll jump in on my number two. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, I just focused on the 2000s to present. So no Bulls mentions for me, but I do slide in the Warriors here just to acknowledge that 5 or so year run and complete dominance over that span of time, and not just once they got KD, obviously, but the best teams even when, just with Steph, Clay, Draymond, and obviously like Manhas touched on earlier, that just entire kind of deep lineup of folks. And my counter to that, to size, which I do respect, like the Spurs longevity when you include those earlier years, but I mean, we'll see, but I don't think they're necessarily done either. I think Steph and Clay plan to stick around, and they have pieces in place right now to start building that back up again. So I don't think that run is over. We'll see if they can get another title, but I don't think that is necessarily a done deal at this point. And I think even just when you look at that 5-year period, and even just when you look at that single team, I think you have to have them, towards the top of the list, or at least on the list, of course. But that's my number two.
One thing I will say is the reason that I don't think they're ever going to be able to do that again is because of the way the money rules went in the NBA. Because if I remember correctly, they had some interesting clause that happened where they already had Draymond, Clay, and Steph under contract, and were still somehow able to, cap space wise, with Iguodala and Livingston and people like that on the roster, have the money to sign somebody like Kevin Durant. In the modern NBA, with the way the cap rules work, usually that would never work. But I think they just missed the cutoff for a new rule that was imposed. And I to be honest, I don't completely remember the exact specifics of it, but that's why I don't think it's going to happen again. Because if this is the way I look at the Warriors, okay? Kevin Durant, once he got there, there's no dispute that with Kevin Durant, especially in those singular seasons, they would have been in the argument for maybe the greatest team we've ever seen. Like if you look at especially the starting five, you get a starting five of Steph, Clay, Draymond, Kevin Durant, and anybody else if you want to throw in Iguodala, you can throw in Iguodala. If you want to throw in a big, you can throw in a big. That's crazy. That is an insane lineup. But before Kevin Durant got there, in that period of time with the Steph, Clay, Draymond, they had him for more than those 2 years and had one championship in that period. 2015 was the only year they won. And 2015 was also the year where they went to the finals and faced that Cleveland Cavaliers team where LeBron came in with Kyrie and Kevin Love in the playoffs, and then they lost Kevin Love while the playoffs were going on. And then Kyrie Irving went down game one of the finals. And then LeBron with Matthew Dellavedova and who was it, Mozgov, took the Warriors 6 games, if I remember correctly. So you're telling me if Durant didn't go over there, that team with just Clay and Steph were going to continue to keep this dynasty going? And now we're in a position where they're a little bit older. They're getting hurt a little bit more. Durant decided, I don't want to play with you guys because you guys don't know how to appreciate the fact that I was the best player you ever had. And so he left. But Draymond's older and he's not really successful anymore. And they're already signing these guys to big money contracts. So who are they really going to bring in now and revoke this whole dynasty that they had in this 5-year period? I mean, I just don't see that. I mean, they're not going to have a top 5 to 10 draft pick. When is the last time you see?
They're the worst team in the NBA. If they have their pick.
I mean, whatever. I mean, they're the worst team. They're the worst team now. This is what I mean about this season. Like they got so lucky. Like with timing wise, the fact that the season basically ended and they were in the position that they're in is just a pure blessing because it's the first time that they weren't relevant. And of course, that season is essentially canceled. Like that drives me crazy.
Can I draw an analogy here? You want to know how the Spurs got really good? Well, you have to understand they had David Robinson, who was a beast before Tim Duncan got there, and then he got injured the 1 year, and then they were able to get the number 1 pick in the draft the next year. And guess who that was? It was Tim Duncan. And they were able to actually build off the caliber core that they already have with the Spurs, built for the future. So
Interesting.
David Robinson.
the
David
Warriors
Robinson
did.
was. David Robinson wasn't playing with 2 or 3 other guys that were also superstars. Is my point, right? Like it was David
I'm
Robinson.
saying it was a
number one.
different era, but like the fact that
Yeah.
the Warriors have a chance to rebuild now, I think they're in a position to, and I think they will. They've proven time and time again that they'll make really good moves, and they have a core, and they're still not old. They're all under like 32 years old.
I'm not sitting here saying they're not going to be a competitive team in the West. I'm sitting here saying that they're not going to win another championship, nor do I think they're going to get to another championship for as long as some of these other teams in the West exist. But I'm going to move on to number 2 because
That's not going to be very long, though.
What'd you say?
You're talking about like the Lakers and I mean Clippers a little
Why do
younger.
you think the Clippers or teams like that wouldn't be able to last? I mean, there's keep in mind a bunch of the best rookies.
LeBron won't be there.
A bunch of the best rookies in the NBA right now are in the West. There's a lot of teams that have a bright future.
Yeah, the West is good. You got the Nuggets, you got the Jazz.
Future ahead of them, dude. And don't forget about the Pelicans. There's a lot of teams that are starting to build their pieces. I don't know why you react that way. They just got Zion back and started playing great, and we're pulling themselves back to the playoffs. So let's not sleep on the future. I think people get too hung up on the recent times. But I'm going to move on to my number 2. Number 2 for me was the Lakers. And again, my list has been not a singular year, but what they did in a period of time with their core. And with that in mind, there's no way I couldn't include the Lakers, starting with Shaq and Kobe. From when Kobe started as number 8 and went all the way to number 24 and managed to win championships in every jersey that he ever wore. Rest in peace to the Mamba. There's no way I wasn't going to be able to have him in my top 3. Just the run of dominance they had over a 10 to 12 year span was very Lakers-esque because, we've had many periods of our history of the NBA of the Lakers being a dominant franchise, and that was the one that happened in our lifetime. So I think that's the one that I'm going to have to allude to more than any. And just the fact that the Kobe and Shaq were so intent on being the alpha. And even though they basically hated playing with each other, were just so dominant and still winning. And then Shaq leaves and then they just essentially add other pieces and continue to win. It just points to, one, how incredible Kobe was, how incredible Shaq was, and how incredible Phil Jackson was, because at the end of the day, he's encapsulating a big part of my top 3, as I'm sure you'll find out soon enough. So that franchise is definitely number 2 for me. And I don't really have a lot more to say. I think they kind of speak for themselves. So, yep. My house, number 1, man.
Number 1, I think we've beat the drum to death, but I'm going to have to go with the 2017 Warriors. This is the singular year Warriors with the Kevin Durant year where everyone on that team was going nuts. I think their whole entire team shot above 40%, which is, you can't guard that. That's just like everyone draining all day. But I think the most important part of that was the fact that Steve Kerr really let everyone play their games. He really melted all that talent. It's easy to get a guy like Kevin Durant and also have dudes like Curry there, but like to have everyone reach their potential, I think says a lot about the coach. And we haven't seen any team exhibit that level of dominance over a whole year. I don't think anyone posed the challenge that year. And I'm not sure we'll ever see a team like that again for a singular stretch of time. So yeah, I don't want to keep talking about the Warriors, but it's hard to not say that they're the best team for that year.
And I will say, when we're talking about the best teams of our lifetime, it's hard not to talk about the Warriors, especially with how relevant they've been in recent times too, because they're clearly the most dominant one in recent history. So that makes sense. And of course, again, I'm glad we mentioned that KD Warriors were number 1 because, KD was the best player on that team. All right. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
All right. So let me take you to the Golden State Warriors of 2015 and 2016, because that is my number 1 team. This is not the Kevin Durant era. This is actually quite the opposite. This is the 73-9 team, something we had never seen before. The Golden State Warriors, first of all, let's give a shout out to them because they drafted well. They drafted guys like Harrison Barnes, Manas. They drafted guys like Steph Curry, like Klay Thompson, like Draymond Green. They were able to, I remember when the Warriors were like a solid 6 or 7 seed in the playoffs, and with lose in the first or second round of the playoffs, but they would make it incredibly challenging. And I was watching these like playoff series, and I was like, damn, these guys are good. Like these guys are just a couple of pieces away before, breaking through. And obviously, they did that over the next couple of years. But the reason why I think the 2015, 2016 Golden State Warriors were the best team of all time was simply because it was something that not one team had ever seen before. Just the constant raining of threes from every different position on the court. Steph Curry hit 402 threes that year. That broke his own record, which was 286. So not even like the number 2 at that point wasn't even in the 300s. Like Steph Curry shattered that record. And then Klay Thompson was like 3rd or 4th behind him in that running list and set records of his own. So just those 2 players in itself, Draymond was incredible. But the reason why I thought this team was better without Durant than with Durant was because with the 2015-2016 Warriors, those players just knew their roles better. I think Kevin Durant came in and just screwed a lot of things up. There were many, many times during the regular season and the postseason that Draymond was beefing with him, Steph was beefing with him, etc., because KD he thought it was his team like it was in Oklahoma City and was just dribbling the ball. He wasn't swinging the ball. They weren't playing Warriors basketball, and he was just chucking up shots from deep. So that was one thing that I found very frustrating with the Warriors team with Kevin Durant. And another thing that I want to point to is just the fact that if you look at statistics, points per game, and the amount of threes, right? We all think Kevin Durant's a shooter, right? So you think the amount of threes would go up. They actually plummeted in the years that Durant was on the Warriors. So if you look at the stats from the 2015-2016 Warriors in comparison to the years after, they had more points per game as a team, and then their team also made more three-pointers and shot more efficiently. So not outside of just the regular season wins and that championship. Oh, I guess they lost the championship that year. They lost the championship that year. But still, if you look at all of those stats, come on, it's done.
All right, here we go.
So my
All right,
only
we're talking
thing
about this.
I just have one
Go
thing
ahead,
to say
Manas.
about it.
No, go ahead.
So I love that team, obviously, but I think they peaked a little bit too early. I think they let the record get to their head, and there was just too much hubbub going around matching the record that the Bulls set, and they really couldn't live up to that potential. And then once Draymond went out in the finals, I think that finals was just not going to end the same way. But yeah, that team was lights out. Like you're saying, it was probably the greatest 3-point shooting we'll ever see again.
Yeah, because there's no pressure. And I think Durant, he kind of skewed the optics a little bit. And I also think before Durant, they were able to pay players, and they had a much more vast bench, right? They were able to pull from guys like Iguodala, Harrison Barnes, other players that were able to step up big time while guys like Curry and Klay were resting, and they were totally fine. They were still a top tier caliber team with their bench. And when Durant came in, they had to get rid of half of those guys. So that was why I thought the 15-16 Warriors were the best team ever.
Oh, we're definitely talking about this. There's no way I'm letting this
I knew
one
you
slide.
would be, Si.
There's no way I'm letting this one slide. All right. I can definitely respect you having a team in your top 5 that didn't win the championship as in your top 5. I will not blame you for doing that. But having them at number 1 ahead of the Chicago Bulls, who won 71 games and won the championship. Are you kidding me? First of all, that team, the Warriors team that you talked about, got beat. So that in itself should mean that they're not the best team of our lifetime. Secondly, you were just straight disrespecting Kevin Durant, because even though I agree with you that their chemistry as a team was better in terms of their efficiency that year during the regular season, look at what the Warriors did in the playoffs and in terms of winning championships when they got Kevin Durant. Because at the end of the day, the championship is what matters, not your, I put up more three-pointers than the other team. I don't give a damn if you put up a million more three-pointers than the other team if you don't go win the title at the end of the day. When Kevin Durant went over to the Warriors, when the playoffs came around, it wasn't good old Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or Draymond Green hitting the game-winning shots. It wasn't them taking over in the fourth quarter more often than not. 90% of the stretch, but and majority of those games, it was Kevin Durant stepping in and saying, oh, you guys want to see why I came over to the Warriors? Stop giving me crap. I'm going to take this game over. And he went and delivered and won those championships. And although it was a team effort, there's no way you can dispute that when the playoffs came around, Kevin Durant wasn't the best player on that team. They went to the finals twice with him and won. And in both of those finals, Kevin Durant was the finals MVP. So do not take anything away from Kevin Durant. And there's no way in my mind in which I could agree with the 2015-2016 year. It's the year that they lost in the finals to the Cleveland Cavaliers, them being the best team. I definitely would not dispute it if your list was more similar to, let's say, Manhas's or Muskan's, where he had the Warriors with Kevin Durant in the championship, because they actually won and it wasn't even close. Like, the Cavaliers went 7 and beat the Warriors, and whether you want to argue if Draymond being there or not would have caused the Warriors to win or not, when Durant got there, the Cavaliers barely were able to hang on for 5 or 6, because that's how dominant the Warriors were. It was, even if there's more depth on that team without Durant, with Durant, that team was so dominant in the starting 5 that nobody could hang. I mean, it was that was the craziest. What do they call them? The Hampton 5. That's what it was. The Hampton 5. That was the craziest five-person team I'd ever seen in terms of a starting 5. So I can't get behind the team without Kevin Durant being better than the team with Kevin Durant, because I just think that's straight disrespectful to one of the GOATs of our lifetime. So
But if you look at the whole season, they were. I mean, I agree they shouldn't be number 1 compared to that Bulls team because they didn't win the title. I agree with that. But it's like, if you look at the whole season, that team was better.
The 2015 team?
Yeah.
Of
if
course.
you look at the whole season,
In every aspect.
the finals went to Game 7, right?
Are y'all really going to tell me that the 2015 Warriors without Kevin Durant was better than the Kevin Durant Warriors that a year later played that exact same Cavaliers team and beat them in 5 games? They beat them in 5 games. It wasn't even close. They straight dominated the playoffs.
Yeah, they were a better matchup for the Cavs.
What I'm saying is they peaked at the right time. Yes, that playoff. But if you look at the regular season, how many more games did they win? 6 or 7 more games in the regular season.
Why
They won
But that's
significantly
my
more than
argument.
that.
Okay, let me ask you something.
And look at Zach's all those
The
stats.
2016-2017 Warriors only won I don't even know if they won 65 games that season.
Okay, so if you guys want to say that, then the Warriors got Kevin Durant, right? Were the Warriors better or were the Rockets better? Because the Rockets had a better regular season record with James Harden and with Chris Paul, and guess who won the championship that year? It was the Warriors. So at the end of the day, the Warriors were the better team. Why are you guys trying to sit here and tell me that with their regular season record, they were better than the Kevin Durant Warriors? Are you guys forgetting how damn good Kevin Durant is?
Because that's the best single season in NBA history.
As in a regular season. Like,
hey,
that makes no
and,
sense.
And they go to, I mean.
Oh, my. I'm done.
But you're basically counting it on. You're basically counting it on one game where Draymond was hurt, right?
We're done.
Draymond was done for the finals.
Yeah,
we're done. We're done. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm not saying they're number 1 ahead of the Bulls, but I mean, I think it's fair to say a team that won 73 games, best regular season in NBA history, take it to 7 against another great team and lose because one of their 3 best players is out. I mean, that's a small margin.
From a field goal efficiency standpoint, they still beat the
not even close.
Why are you talking about field goal efficiency when they didn't win the championship? And you guys are sitting here acting like Draymond Green was out for the entire season. He missed the entire series. He missed 1 game. I'm sick and tired of them making excuses. All right. The season before, Steph Curry went the entire playoffs without playing a starting point guard, went to the finals and played LeBron without Kyrie and without Kevin Love, and LeBron took them 6. So if you can't beat the Cavaliers,
LeBron can take anyone.
No, LeBron can take anyone 6. What did LeBron do the next 2 years when they played Kevin Durant Warriors, where they got
5?
They got beat.
Whatever.
They got beat for 5. Oh, no. Evan, hold up. Before you try to divert the topic, before I prove you wrong again, what happened the next year when Kevin Durant played the Warriors in the finals and got swept in 4 games with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green? There is no way in my mind you will convince me, so it's not even worth.
But the argument isn't
without Kevin Durant, the Warriors were better. There's no.
The argument isn't peaks. It's about sustaining that over an entire season. I think is the argument Zach and I are making. If you look at the whole season, that team was more dominant. And yes, the Durant, that team, yes, when at their peak, which was during those finals, yes, that team is better and more talented. But if you look at the whole season,
you were more afraid to play the Warriors without Kevin Durant than with Kevin Durant.
Yes.
The way they were playing at the end of those
All
finals,
right,
no.
I'm done. You guys.
Now, don't get me wrong. Like that Durant team was a
I'm
better
done.
matchup for the Cleveland
For
Cavaliers because
everybody
Durant was
in
able
the
to lock
NBA.
down defensively
They were
on
better
LeBron.
matchup for everybody in the NBA. For everybody in the NBA, because in the playoffs they straight dominated with Kevin Durant.
And the Warriors did that too.
Matter. Okay, first of all, that's also not
fair. Or the Warriors
of
2015, 2016 did too.
That's also not fair because the Warriors of 2015, 2016 had been playing together for 5 or 6 years at that point. In Kevin Durant's first season of being on the Warriors, they had to take a guy that was used to taking like 30 or so shots a game and fit him into a system. He was able to take that season, try to build that chemistry. And even though the regular season wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, by the second half of the season, they were able to incorporate him, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. They were all able to make compromises. Andre Iguodala was able to make the compromise of going to the bench and coming off the bench. And by the time the playoffs rolled around, that team had figured out that chemistry. And then once the playoffs started, they straight dominated throughout the entire playoffs. Then the next regular season, they straight dominated. And then that next playoffs, they straight dominated because at that point, they'd figured out their chemistry with Kevin Durant. It's not fair that the Warriors 5 years after the fact, and after Steph took 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years before he was even an MVP caliber player, and Klay Thompson filled his role, and Draymond Green filled his role, and then Kevin Durant enters his first season, wins a championship his second season, and then his third season he gets hurt, and that's the only reason they don't win a championship? I mean, come on, that is ridiculous. I don't want to hear that nonsense.
That's a good point. Manas, what do you think?
I think the Warriors are a great team. That's all I have to say.
So it's such a political.
He doesn't want to get in the middle of this.
I don't blame him.
Well, okay, here's what I see what Sai is saying. So I think the peak of the Kevin Durant Warriors is high. Like if I were a player,
yeah, I get that too.
I think that team is just like when they're at the max, like when Kevin Durant is clicking with the rest of the Splash Brothers, yeah, that team is gonna be better. Like you're trading out KD for Harrison Barnes. I mean, I'm a Harrison Barnes guy.
Thank you.
Like there is no Harrison here.
I was getting ready for you to back us up on this because I was like, oh, Harrison Barnes is my ticket holder here. This is going to push me to the finish line.
To do anything in that final series, like KD would not be on that Warriors team. Harrison Barnes like breaks every shot. So you could think we have him to thank for that really great Warriors team, I would say.
We have Harrison Barnes to thank for the fact that Kyrie Irving and LeBron James were able to win that other championship too. Because even though Draymond was out, Harrison Barnes was an absolute dud that entire series. Like that man could not shoot a basketball into an ocean. Like I'll bring that one back. Like he was so bad, and I'm so thankful for him for that reason because at least we didn't have to see the Warriors win again that year. So I'm happy about that. Anyway,
E, what's your number 2, brother?
Number one.
Oh, no, you're number 1. Sorry, number 1.
Thank goodness. But yeah, I got the Lakers here. I mean, I think obviously we've talked about the Lakers. Rest in peace, Kobe. And this. I did span it over both Lakers teams, obviously Kobe being on both, but the Shaq and the Pau eras. So it's kind of just all encompassing of that whole 20-ish year period in Kobe's Lakers. And I think Manas, you made a good point at the beginning. Like that was the team that also got me into the NBA, specifically, obviously Kobe, but really those teams and those awesome finals runs. For whatever reason, when I was growing up, I called myself a Lakers fan, and I can't exactly source why, but I think there are a lot of people like you too, sir, that like it had to be Kobe, you know. I mean, I come up with a bunch of random reasons that maybe were other possibilities, but I think the bottom line is just, you know, how can you not be a Lakers fan watching that man play? So Lakers at number 1, including both the Pau team and the Shaq team.
Got a lot of respect for that. And Manas is actually the biggest Lakers fan I've ever met in my life. So it's pretty funny that in this whole time, or not Lakers, he's the biggest Kobe Bryant fan I've ever met in my life. That's what I meant to say. And I'm surprised he never actually mentioned that this whole time. I think he was trying to keep the bias under check, but there ain't nothing wrong with that because Kobe was something special. So yeah, again, rest in peace to one of the GOATs. Number 1 for me, and I think it's just because of the way we approach our list, because I guarantee you, Evan and Manas, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I know for a fact you would have had the 90s Bulls in your 5 if we were including the 90s in your list, because the Bulls are number 1 for me. And honestly, I don't even think it's close. Like, I don't think any team that we talked about could really hold their own against that team, except like maybe in a singular season, like, you know, the Kevin Durant Warriors or the Kobe Bryant Shaq Lakers could, but I'm talking about over that span of time, like in accolades and accomplishments. I think the Bulls are just on a planet of their own, and we've never really seen that before, because it wasn't just the fact that they won those championships. It was the consistency in which they won. It was two three-peats and 6 championships. They had that 71-win season and won the championship that season. And it seemed like since Jordan got there, the other thing that I truly respected about them is that it was a franchise that before Jordan got there was not winning, right? A lot of these other teams we mentioned, even though they had, you know, several pieces that they put together, which is why the Warriors are a good comparison, because the Warriors weren't winning before Steph Curry and all those guys got there. The Bulls weren't winning before Michael Jordan got there. And then they acquired, you know, what a lot of people consider as the GOAT and built this dynasty. And just the way that they were able to maneuver it, even with all the drama that was going on with the GM and within the team and internally over the years, and Phil Jackson coming in there again, you know, them firing their head coach, putting him in, just all these little pieces somehow played out to this perfect story of a 2 3-peats. And that's just something that I don't think is ever really going to be topped in recent era. And I don't know if we'll ever see it again in our lifetime. So that's why I had to have the Bulls at 1. I mean, it's hard to argue against them. So
yeah, it's hard to argue. I mean, a testament to their greatness is like the number of teams that we actually never even hear about, even though they were so good. You know, there were the 90s Knicks, the 90s Jazz, the Reggie Miller Pacers, Charles Barkley is one of the greatest players ever.
Yeah, that's true.
All these players, like, they just sort of get swept under the rug just because they had to deal with the Goliath every single year. And it's just, it's amazing. And the other part, if you look at the Bulls as like a linear history, the first three-peat, you have MJ and Scottie. And then the second three-peat, you have those two guys, but the whole other cast of characters is totally different. So those are the only two guys that carried over from the two different sets. And it just goes to show you like how they were able to sustain that level of dominance with those two guys and their coach. It's just, yeah, how long they were able to do it. It's just, as I was saying, I don't know if we'll ever see that again.
Yeah, and I do think Phil Jackson's side, you mentioned him earlier and gave him a shout out, which is much deserved. I mean, obviously being a part of both of those, you know, the Lakers teams and the Bulls teams, I mean, obviously he gets a massive amount of credit for, you know, what he's able to do. So I was glad you got him into the convection earlier.
I actually, it's funny you say that, Ev, because I was actually sitting there with Monhas last weekend and we were watching The Last Dance together, like in my basement, and we were talking about Phil Jackson and we're like, how many championships has this guy won, right? Not only did he win championships with the Lakers and the Bulls as their coach, and not only did he win 6 with the Bulls and 5 with the Lakers, he won 1 as a player. And that blew my mind. Like I guess at some point in my life I'd heard that, but just thinking of him as a coach, I never really put that together. But he won an NBA championship as a player and then went on to win, I think, 11 total after that as a coach, which is just mind-boggling to think about. This man is a 12 or 13-time NBA champion.
That's crazy.
That's crazy,
13
dude.
championships and that mustache. Oh my God.
That mustache. The only thing that I think he could have done better in his career was to never be a GM, because he might be the greatest coach we've ever seen, but one of the worst GMs we've ever seen. So there's some serious irony in that. I mean, we also have Michael
we all have a ceiling.
We also have Michael Jordan, who's one of the greatest players we've ever seen, but all the worst owners we've ever seen. So clearly some of these guys need to stick to their roles a little bit, but that's okay. This is the part I'm probably most excited for. We've done our top 5.
Oh, me too.
But I teed you all up and said, hey, let's do honorable mentions this week, because there are definitely some teams that I truly loved and had a special place in my heart, but I couldn't put in my top 5 as a rational, you know, NBA and basketball fan. So with that in mind, Manas, do you have any honorable mentions? And if so, who are they?
I'll name one. I might need to think of a few a little bit later, but like one that stands out to me is the 2004 Pistons. It's
you took mine, dude. So true, man. That was my favorite one. I was getting so excited to like present that one.
Oh man, all right. I probably won't do as good of a job as you will, but like, yeah, it's just their whole team is just a bunch of role players. They have Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, and you got Larry Brown, the journeyman coach. It's just players that literally all they did. It's like a team that if Bill Belichick assembled in basketball, that would be the team, except there's no Tom Brady there. But it was a beautiful thing to watch, and how they just took apart my beloved Lakers that year. It was pretty sad. But they ran Kobe into the ground, man. They defensively, they were just incredible. But yeah, big shout out to the Motor City Pistons of 2004.
Absolutely. Just seconding that, I think the only other guy that you didn't mention was Tayshaun Prince. You guys remember him? He was a freak of nature.
Yes.
He was the longest player ever. Like he would take one dribble and he would go from like the 3-point line to the basket. It was like unbelievable, his like length and like his maneuverability. But I just love that team run by Chauncey Billups up front at point guard. You had Ben Wallace, who was just a freak of nature at center, and just like all of the other rotational pieces that Manas mentioned earlier. But another thing too was I just love the fact that like they played like a Detroit-oriented team. They were just tough. Like they almost like emulated the Pistons team from the 90s that we're actually watching in The Last Dance, that would just beat the crap out of other teams, like physically, like try to manhandle teams. Like those Isaiah Thomas years, right? And so there was just this epitome of toughness with that Pistons team, and like from like 2002 to 2005 or 6 or however long that reign was. And so that was definitely one that I wanted to mention as well. I think the only other one that I would mention was the 2011, I think it was 2011 Chicago Bulls with D Rose winning the MVP. He was unbelievable. Talk about maneuverability. I mean, that guy was incredible in the air. I mean, his body control in the air. He would go with these like wild reverse layups under 7-foot plus defenders. And then you also had, other strong pieces in Carlos Boozer and Joakim Noah. I thought that team was they were always the number one team in the East. Now, they never really fared super well in the playoffs just because of LeBron and Boston and whatnot. But
didn't they get swept by the Wizards once?
I think they might have actually, because I know the Wizards always struggled with the Cavs, right? The Caron Butler, Gilbert Arenas, Antoine Jameson team always struggled with LeBron, but I'm not sure if they were
newer Wizards. This was newer Wizards, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This is like Jay Wall and company?
Yeah, and Beal. I don't know. I guess what Bulls team was that? Because I remember the one-seeded Bulls got swept by the Wizards, but I know it was Boozer, Joakim.
This is like the 2011 Bulls team. So this was like they were undisputedly like the number one seed in the East. But I bet you what might have happened was the Wizards were always like notoriously known for being like in the 4 and 5 spot every year. And so they might have won that matchup, and then they might have played them at the 1 seed in the next round of the playoffs. So who knows?
Yeah, they lost the next round.
Yours.
Yeah, my honorable mention, one of them was the Pistons. That was a good one, but my favorite one is the which got shouted out earlier as a runner-up, but the New Jersey Nets with Jason Kidd, Kerry Kittles, Richard Jefferson, Lucius Harris. And the reason I love this team so much was just from one random night in college, I saw someone wearing, I think it was a Kerry Kittles jersey. And we ended up talking for like 5 to 10 minutes. We had a few beverages at this point, of course, about the Lucius Harris New Jersey Nets for like 10 minutes. It was just a funny memory of mine. But that was a sneaky good team, But that's mine.
Yeah, special shout out to Kenyon Martin of those.
Kenyon Martin.
Cannot forget it.
He had those Nuggets years too, right? Didn't
That's
he play
right.
with Carmelo over there in AI for a little while? Yeah, that was interesting. Okay, so obviously, I'm going to do a little quick shout out to the Cavaliers with LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love. That was one of my favorite, probably my favorite moment in the NBA ever was watching them win that championship. Being down 3-1, LeBron coming home, my favorite player, Kyrie, hitting that shot. Had to mention that team because they beat the best dynasty of the last decade. But my favorite team, before Kyrie was ever my favorite player, there was a young man coming out of Canada who played for the University of Santa Clara I don't know if you guys
yeah.
can start guessing.
Mr. Nash.
There we go, Mr. Steve Nash, the mid-2000s Phoenix Suns.
Yes.
That might be the best team that I've ever seen in my lifetime that never won a championship because they were absolutely loaded. They had a two-time MVP in Steve Nash. They had Amari Stoudemire in his prime. They had Raja Bell, Leonardo Barbosa, Grant Hill, Boris Diaw, Sean Marion. I mean, that team was absolutely loaded. And the only problem they ever had was Mr. Mamba himself and Kobe Bryant and those Lakers, because getting past that team in the West was almost a nightmare challenge. And I still remember that one series, and I think me and Manas watched this together when we were like little kids of with the players getting suspended on the Suns, and then with this, I think it might have been in the same year where Kobe hit that dagger of a shot on Phoenix in the playoffs and took them out. And to this day, I really, really wish I could have seen Steve Nash go down with a championship, just because I truly believe he is one of my favorite players and maybe one of the best point guards I've ever seen with my own two eyes. And that team will always have a special place in my heart because I just had so much fun watching them play. And it was just such a good, well-balanced form of basketball. And they're just, I don't know, it was just entertaining beyond belief. So that's definitely the team
that was a good one.
Good one.
Very good one, yeah. And
hey,
I wanted to mention one thing. So Evan has brought up, I think it's a great idea, to, at the end of every segment or at some point during our segment, bring up things that we have stated beforehand that weren't necessarily correct.
Yep.
And so one that I wanted to bring to mention, because I did some of my own research on this, was in I can't remember if it was the last podcast or the podcast before, but you mentioned, if we go back to Bachelor Talk, he stated that Ben Higgins, one of the bachelors, proposed to this girl named Taylor Clark, and that her brother was Taylor Clark, who went to Broad Run, struck Evan and I out multiple times in Little League, and then is now pitching for the Arizona Diamondbacks, I believe.
Yep.
So that is not her brother.
That's what it said.
No, that's not her brother. Philip Clark is her brother, and he is on the Toronto Blue Jays.
Good get. This makes a lot more sense.
I just wanted to state that.
Wait. Are you sure?
I'm almost positive. In my 5 minutes of research, I was able to uncover this information.
That does make more sense, but I thought I'd looked it up. I'm gonna have to look it up after. That makes more sense, though.
That felt
Good
like
job,
a
Zach.
sort of Maury right there. That was not your brother.
You are not the brother.
Not the brother. Jerry Springer. I think one thing we definitely need to do with the amount of basketball conversations or conversations we have while we play basketball. Evan said we should have a vlog, so maybe one day we'll come to you with a vlog of us shooting hoops on the parks of Breezy Hills. But I think
we got a lot of ideas.
I think a lot of these segments will definitely have the blooper reels of previous weeks, like when Zach said the team that never won a championship was his number one.
Oh, man.
And he didn't realize it until after he finished giving the whole description. So
I was like,
that moment. He's like, when they won the championships, but oh wait, they didn't win the championship. Good.
Oh, man,
right,
guys, this has been fun.
Always a pleasure. Manas, thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Thank you guys for having me.
What am I doing? Muskan.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Muskan.
Yeah, man, that was an
Pleasure.
absolute pleasure. Ev, Zach, any last thoughts? You guys can sign us off today because
Zach's got me distracted by this. I'm trying to confirm his correction here. I'm not convinced, but we'll follow up next week.
All right,
follow
I'm
up next week.
just gonna sign us off because I don't want these guys taking this down a bachelor path too far down the road. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for tuning in. This was Mondays Down South.